there's lots of factors, but there will often be some loss of community and social support, and it is devastating. There is also just a lot of like practical losses that we don't talk about. Like when I think about, and I try not to think about this because it will actually cause me to go crazy, but when I think about the loss of income and economic opportunity as a result of illness, and I see it in like a couple of different ways. There's just sort of the practical, I can't take on as many clients as I can in a perfectly healthy season. And then there are all of the things that you are just forced to spend money on that you can't avoid when you're sick, whether it's, meal delivery because you're too sick to cook, or additional childcare. I mean, gosh, I light money on fire when it comes to having qualified people to help take care of my kid, because I know I can only do so much.
Hello, my grieving friend. It's Lisa. Whether you're a longtime listener or you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm so glad you're here. By now, you likely know I'm passionate about exploring the nature of grief. As a narrative therapy trained social worker, a grief activist, and a widow, I'm dedicated to helping us learn to be in relationship with our grief instead of running from it. In our modern culture, we've pushed grieving into the shadows, something to be experienced privately, causing us to suffer unnecessarily and in isolation. Grief is our human inheritance. It offers us medicine if we tend to it as a community. So together with my extraordinary guests, and this season answering your questions too, we're changing the narratives of grief, one conversation at a time. She's back. Yes, another favorite guest returns to the show. This time it's my extraordinary friend, Marisa Renee Lee. Since our first conversation, I think nearly 4 years ago now, we've seen each other through several ups and, to be quite honest, a lot of downs. The death of loved ones, family members, mental health crises, cancer, serious chronic illness, and more. And through it all, we've learned that being honest with one another and starting from a place of acceptance is what it takes to connect with hope. In case you don't know her yet, Marisa Renee Lee is the award-winning and best-selling author of Grief is Love. For her work on grief and healing, she's been featured on Good Morning America, NPR, in Vogue, in The Atlantic, and so many other outlets. In our conversation today, we explore her new, powerful book, Waiting for Dawn, which is out April 2026, where she reflects on her experiences with chronic illness and grief, offering solace to folks living with all kinds of uncertainty. Now, living with uncertainty is something we are all experiencing, I would say now more than ever in these times. So today we explored the realities of her long COVID, the necessary challenge of accepting what is in uncertain times, the journey of adapting to a new reality, and the opportunity these challenges offer us in refining and reconnecting to what we value most. Marisa is authentic, honest, funny, and fierce, and I'm excited to share this conversation with you today. Welcome back, my friend. Welcome, everybody. Please welcome Marisa Renee Lee back to the podcast. So good to have you here, my friend.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Listeners heard at the top of the show that we met and became friends for something years ago when your
Yeah.
gorgeous book, Grief is Love, came out. And we have seen each other offline through some times.
Yes.
That feels
More
like
than I
saying
care to admit.
exactly. Through some times, definitely some cheerleading and some great things, but also showing up for one another in the darkest of things too. And so I'm so glad to bring this conversation to our listeners in particular, because I get to bring your gorgeous book coming out, might be out by the time this episode drops, but coming out in April, Waiting for Dawn, living with uncertainty. If you're watching on YouTube at Lisa Keefauver MSW, let me do a little is it called ASMR? With all the sticky notes flagged here, we're going to dive deep into this conversation. Friend, so
Yay!
good to see you.
Same, same. This is great.
This is a book. I mean, of course, I love everything you write, and the honesty and the authenticity, the integrity that you bring to all of your work. But I felt particularly in this book is the medicine that we read need right now. This is the medicine we need right now. The um, uncertainty feels like the theme of
It's
this.
next level. It's next level. I mean, we woke up, what, a week and a half ago, and we were at war? Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure when you were writing it, it was like it was one thing. And now, the timing
Yeah,
of this book coming out feels extraordinarily, I don't want to use the word serendipitous because that feels, I'm
I
not sure if that's the
know.
right word, but
It's weird. It's
yeah.
super weird. But I do hope that it will help a lot of people figure out how to navigate life and the world right now because it is a lot.
It is. Marissa, I was thinking since you're one of many guests I'm actually having back for a second time this season, and you and the listeners will remember that at the beginning of every episode, I typically ask, what is your earliest memory of loss? And what do you think the adults taught you about what grief should or shouldn't be? And I've been thinking as I've been preparing for our conversation today, um, that I'd love to ask you to talk or reflect a little bit about this concept that you talk about in the book around gray grief and grieving the sort of ambiguous, uncertain losses. Can you think of a time before this era of your life when someone in your life was navigating a kind of ambiguous loss or a gray grief? And what did you learn back then about what it meant to be in that kind of grief?
Yeah. I mean, I think the hard thing about it is we don't talk about that kind of grief enough culturally. We don't have a lot of language around it. That's why I made up the term great grief. And I define great grief as a period of uncertainty. And I go deeper and define uncertainty as any sort of extended period of stress or overwhelm relating to the unknown. So it can be in regard to a relationship, it can be a challenge with your child, it can be caregiving for an elderly parent, it can be an illness you encounter, divorce, job loss, like it can be so many things. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, some combination of all of those things are going to happen to all of us in this life. And figuring out how to identify it when it happens so that you can then figure out how to live with it as
Yeah.
well as you possibly can is of
Yeah.
critical importance. And, for me, I would say like the first iteration is actually when I was a kid. My parents were navigating some challenges with my younger sister. She was super bright, that was very clear to everyone in our family that, Heather's super, super smart, but she was struggling in school. And I can remember her kindergarten teacher wanted to hold her back. And my mom and dad were like, absolutely not. But they also didn't really know how to navigate, the public education system and, getting her the resources that she needed and the proper testing and all of these things. And, the big lesson for me that came out of that experience, it's twofold. One, your instincts matter. Like my parents had very clear instincts around their child. And I just remember, my mom and my dad just being so clear and firm about what was and was not acceptable for my younger sister. And two, like community is everything. One of my best friends in our neighborhood growing up, her father was a superintendent in a different school district. And
Mm,
so, when my parents didn't know really like what to do, how to ask for help, they went to Mr. Adderson. And I can remember like the parents getting together and kids playing in the basement or in the backyard or whatever. And he really helped walk them through that challenging period. And, unfortunately, it would be, gosh, less than a decade later when Mr. Adderson would pass away in
Mhm.
a road rage incident. So, like, suddenly, this man who was a constant part of my life was
Yeah.
murdered by someone. And, then seeing my parents and my family show up for this other family. So,
Yeah.
community and just really trusting your instincts are two, I think, critical components of living well through any period of great grief or uncertainty.
Yeah. Wow, what a powerful story and example too, and a reminder. And to your point, I mean, I'm going on this show all the time about how 100% of us will experience grief multiple times in our lives. And I'm
Yeah.
often talking about non-death losses. And I think now more than ever, your book, this work in the context of our culture, we're recognizing um, more and more the need for both of those things that you just named. One is learning to discern what it is we need, and you talk what
Yeah.
we need, like our own instincts, which you talk about a lot in this book, and also that we're not meant to do this alone.
No, no. Like, I don't know why people think that.
Yeah.
Humans evolved in community for a reason. Like,
Yeah.
this is the way it is supposed to be. But unfortunately, when the culture is so hyper individualistic and committed to, perfection and capitalism and all of these other things that are not helpful,
Yeah.
you feel shame when you can't do these things by yourself. But why would you ever wanna do life, the good stuff or the
No.
bad stuff, by
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah. Nor can we, nor and it's all a fallacy, by the way, when we think that
Yeah,
we're quote unquote doing it by ourselves. We're not,
it's not
because we're
true.
part of systems, institutions, communities. Well, I want to dive deep into so many of the themes that you brought up in this book. As I said, were so resonant to everyone listening to the show. Even if you're listening and haven't experienced maybe a profound death loss, my guess is you or someone you love has or is experiencing what you're calling great grief, what we sometimes refer to as these ambiguous non-death losses. We left off in our last conversation on the show talking about all of the wisdom and lessons that you learned in the wake of your mom's death, Lisa. Uh, your
It's
beautiful
another
mom,
Lisa.
Lisa, another Lisa, who died of breast cancer when you were younger. And we talked about some of the other losses, losses around, fertility and the loss of dreams and identities. But you ground this book very clearly in what has happened to you in more recent years with this catastrophic diagnosis. Do you want to anchor us
Yeah.
in the beginning of this story of how you came to think about uncertainty and how we live with uncertainty?
Yes. Oh gosh, almost exactly 2 years ago, I got COVID for the very first time. And I like to clarify for people, I was out in the world, I was living my life, I went on tour for Grief is Love. My kid was in school, like I was doing all the things. And
Yeah.
I honestly thought that I was just one of those people who was never going to get COVID. We all have that friend who we're super jealous of, and we're like, oh, and I thought I was gonna be that friend that everybody was gonna be hating on, until April 2024, I got it. I, at the time, was already dealing with some health challenges related to the recent COVID booster, and, my body was not in a good place, and, I assumed when I got COVID, a week, 2 weeks tops, I would be fine, all good. I was wrong. I am still dealing with the after effects of that COVID diagnosis. At this point, I am much stronger than I have been in the previous months and last couple of years, but it's been a lot of pain. Like, I have been in pain every day for about 2 years. The level of pain varies, but I haven't had a day where I've woken up and not been in pain in over 2 years. And it's everything from like really bad chest pain. For a long time, I suffered with shortness of breath. I had really bad asthma for a period of several months. I had never had asthma in my life until after I got COVID. I was teaching in the summer of 2024 in Greece, doing a fellowship program there. and I couldn't breathe and had to come home early and learned that my larynx was over 70% blocked when I was rushed to a pulmonologist in the middle of the night. My legs have been incredibly weak. Like, I am someone who exercises or, exercised between 5 and 7 days a week, like my entire life. I've been fit and athletic and strong and fast, and all of those things disappeared. And then there were also all of these neurological side effects, the
Mm.
brain fog that we hear people talk about, incredibly debilitating headaches. I now get Botox every 3 months for the headaches. It's 33 shots every visit, and I hate it, but it definitely works. The headaches were so bad at one point. I wear a night guard for grinding my teeth. I
Yeah.
woke up one morning and a chunk was missing. Like, I had bitten it off in the middle of the night and presumably swallowed it because we never found it. And I can laugh about these things
I
now
know.
because I'm a little bit stronger, but it's been really devastating. For a while, and I'm talking like months, I would be able to get my kid ready and like off to school, do the bedtime routine at the end of the day, maybe take a shower. Sometimes I wasn't strong enough to take a shower. I would have to take a bath because being on my feet was too challenging. And then I could maybe squeeze in like one more thing. And that was it. And that was my life. And I was trying to manage, running a business, finishing this book, and being a mom to a toddler in the midst of this debilitating illness. And it was devastating. And in the summer of 2024, my editor said to me, because you know how it is when you're writing a book, like you have an idea, but then things
Yeah.
change, and you're not really totally sure what you're doing, or at least that's how it is for me every time. She said, I want you to just write like how it feels to be sick and like what you're experiencing right now. And in a matter of like 7 days, maybe, I had 10,000 words. And when I looked back at those words, it was like, oh, these are the chapters. Like, I have actually figured out most of what this book is going to be about. And it's about navigating uncertainty. It's not a book about long COVID. It brings in, other parts of my
Yes.
story, including a story that you were in as well. And so I want people to walk away from reading this book with some improved understanding for how they can best care for themselves when, these horrible things happen in life that happen to all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was so I mean, having been your friend and knowing these things happening, sort of offline, it was just so powerful to read through your book and to see the layers of details of, as you said, of the various things from your cousin going missing to turning up to be that she was murdered to being asked to maybe take care of another child in the midst of your own pain to your mother-in-law's disease, course and her death. There was so much happening, and to see the way that you were able to both make it very personal to your own lived experience while turning towards your readers at every turn, it felt like, and naming like, and this is what it might look like in your life. And this is what you might be noticing. And you might be holding yourself to this impossible standard. And I want you to know I did that too, and it doesn't work. So here's so here's a way we can
Yeah, don't do
can
that.
reframe. I want to talk about some more details around like sort of this movement from like uncertainty, what acceptance is required, what does adapting mean, healing as an ing, not an ed,
Yeah.
some of these big themes and hope and the themes that you talked about. I think it might be important to flesh out a little more as well. um, what are the other losses? I think sometimes when we think about grief, we think about, of course, the death of somebody, but you just touched on some of them. But for our friends who are listening, and I have many in real life, and I know many of our listeners who have things like long COVID for sure, but who have POTS or who have Lyme disease or who have
Yeah.
neurological diseases or who are just going through these transitions in life. What are the losses that we don't name, but that are important for us to acknowledge? I mean, for one, I'm thinking of one of the things you talked about in here is like this sense of yourself as being quick with your words
Yeah.
and smart, and how the brain fog sort of caused you to lose a sense of is Marissa still here? Like sense of self.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think loss of identity is a common one. Another one, and this is hard because again, we are meant to be in community, but loss of community and loss of social connection is also very common. I remember it very clearly when my mom was sick. There was this woman who she was very, very close friends with who just disappeared. And I just remember how hurt and frustrated she was. And the same thing happened to me. Like, as many people as there were that showed up, there were also people who just didn't. And you have to decide when that happens if someone is worthy of your grace. Maybe they have their own things going on. Maybe whatever you're experiencing is triggering for them in ways that you don't even know about or understand. Like, there's lots of factors, but there will often be some loss of community and social support, and it is devastating. There is also just a lot of like practical losses that we don't talk about. Like, when I think about, and I try not to think about this because it will actually cause me to go crazy, but when I think about the loss of income and economic opportunity as a result of illness, and I see it in like a couple of different ways. There's just sort of the practical. I can't take on as many clients as I can in a perfectly healthy season. And then
Yeah.
there are all of the things that you are just forced to spend money on that you can't avoid when you're sick, whether it's, meal delivery because you're too sick to cook or additional childcare. I mean, gosh, I light money on fire when it comes to having qualified people to help take care of my kid because I know I can only do so much. My husband's a professor, like he can't bring a 4-year-old to class every day. Like, and then there are just the doctor's appointments. And, if you have some degree of economic privilege and you're paying for alternative therapies or,
Yeah.
certain medications that I'm on are not covered by insurance, like it goes on and on and on. And it's something that we don't talk about, but that I think is really important to talk about. Like, I think about one of my dear friends has ALS. And when I think about what their family has had to spend on his care, like it devastates me. It
Yeah.
devastates me. And so I think that's one that is often unspoken and, feels a little bit taboo to talk about, but like it's true and it's real.
Yeah.
There's also just like the loss of your typical routines and way of being in the world. Like I miss being able to exercise. Like, and it's such a little thing that before I would have been like, I guess I'll squeeze it in here, whatever. I might have
Yeah.
whined about it. And now I'm like, oh my God, my Peloton. Like, I miss you so much. Like,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's there are a lot of losses, folks.
Yeah.
I hate to
Yeah.
break it to you, but it's better to just name them so that you can then figure out what to do about it. Like, I can't change the fact that I am not able to take on a full client workload right now. That doesn't mean that I can't brainstorm other ways of making money in this season of illness or make plans for my future when I am stronger and healthier. But today, I am
Yeah.
limited and I'm not going to overdo it because I want to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll be right back with more of this beautiful conversation. More than ever, my friends, I'm passionate about creating meaningful community and offering you more insight into my work and even into my life, too. I want a place to explore topics in depth, expand my creative expressions through things like long form essays and even maybe some audio and video guided practices. I want to be able to share some behind the scenes moments from the podcast and maybe even eventually host a Dear Lisa column. Most importantly, I want to build an authentic, interactive community off social media. Life is happening so fast, and I want a place where we can slow down, dive deeper, and figure out how to metabolize it all together. And I'd love to have you join me. That's why I launched my Substack, AFCO with Lisa Keefauver. Now, if you haven't heard me talk about it in my book or from the stage, or maybe even here on the podcast, AFCO stands for Another Fucking Growth Opportunity. Yes, of course, I had to get in a judicious use of cussing. Rest assured, my friends, like in all my work, I'll show up authentically, offer thoughtful, meaningful, and practical guidance on how to center aliveness in a world full of loss. I really look forward to your comments, our chats, creating special audio and video content for you, and more. And if you'd like things delivered to your inbox, don't worry, AFGO with Lisa Keefauver will come directly to you. You can sign up after today's episode at afgowithlisakefauver.substack.com. You can find it in the show notes, or if that's all too much, just head to my website, lisakeefauver.com. I appreciate you naming some of these other ways in which we experience losses. And I especially appreciate the fact that you brought up money. I don't think, again, I'm always talking about the connection
Yeah,
between grief, our grief illiterate culture, and the systems, including capitalism, that we live in. The number one reason people go bankrupt in this country is because of medical
a
debt.
health crisis. Yeah,
And we try to, having just survived my own breast cancer
yeah,
and all of the out of pocket costs and all of the lost income that is still I'm still experiencing the ripple effects from that those lost opportunities to this day is important. We can't pretend our way out of the reality
yeah,
that money impacts our quality of life, including our quality of
100%.
health or our access to health.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I
100%.
love that you mentioned even the things like I miss being able to get on my Peloton, or I miss
Yeah.
the kind of what we might the things that we take for granted. And it just made me think of one of my many expressions that I get from my mom, including we're going to talk later about AFGO, which is also the name of my Substack, which is another fucking growth opportunity, which I feel you worded differently, but talked about in your book. But she reminds me often in my seasons of overwhelm, or when maybe I'm coming through, like maybe when my own chemo brain started to fade, and I is switching your language from I have to I get to.
Yeah, yeah.
And
No,
I
100%.
think when you are limited in these profound ways, when you experience these losses due to health issues, it can um, get you to pivot really quickly on like
Oh,
what
yeah.
do you appreciate about the small things. Are there things that you can do maybe now at this place in your illness, and we're not assuming a linear path forward, that you think, oh, I get to do?
Yeah, no. I mean, this morning, I did not want to get out of bed. I hate daylight savings. But I have a 4.5-year-old. I am responsible for getting him to school on time on Monday mornings. He also hates getting out of bed. Like he's like a teenager. He'll literally hide and pretend like he's not in his bed. And so I was like, like I gotta get up, I gotta get in the shower, like I gotta like get my shit together. And then I was in the shower and I was like, oh, like remember when like taking a shower was a calculated decision? Like that was not that
Yeah.
long ago. Like, okay, I get to take a shower and I get to take him to school without having to worry about the downstream consequences. And like, then I came home and we visited a friend for their 50th over the weekend. And so normally, and this is also something that I couldn't do for a long time, but I can do now. Normally on Sundays, I make a big meal that then has leftovers for Monday, and then I don't have to worry about cooking on Monday. But I didn't get to do that. So then, like, I come home from drop off, I'm like, oh, I have to get this like amazing roast pork like seasoned and in the oven because it cooks for 7 to 8 hours. And I was like, oh, and I can do that without feeling super tired and shitty. And like, I know I can then go on and get some of my work done. Do I still have to rest? Yes. Do I still have to hydrate excessively and monitor grams of protein and ounces of electrolytes and take 2 handfuls of pills a day? Yes, yes, and yes. But now these things are adding up to me having more strength, having more energy, having more capabilities. So yeah, it's a long list of things that I now
Yeah.
get to do.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to name that because whether you're navigating a kind of gray grief over something like an ambiguous loss or a health issue where you're uncertain of really the trajectory of your illness, or you're navigating the uncertainty of those phases of grief in the wake of a death loss, one of the things that that I get to idea offers, and you touch on this a lot in the book, is taking a practice of noticing when things shift. Sometimes when you're in an overwhelm, when you're in deep grief, when you're in deep overwhelm, which of course is the very nature of what you're experiencing, it feels like it's always been like this and it's always going to be like this forever. And so it takes those moments of like pausing and paying attention, being like, oh, this is something that I didn't get to do 2 months ago. And
Yeah.
that's important to sort of buoy you. Yeah. You you talked early on in the book about like, I don't want to have this long COVID. I don't want to be doing
No,
this. That kind of like, I don't want to be in this grief brain. I don't want to be battling this.
I still don't, just so we're
And you
clear.
still don't, of course. We none of us do, but you talked about the wisdom, the lessons, even if you had to be sort of dragged there around. Can you talk to us about why acceptance matters? What does acceptance
If you
offer us?
aren't honest about your reality, you're not going to be able to change it. Like, it's that simple. Like, if you wanna be in denial about the fact that, you know, your marriage is facing challenges and things aren't great between you and your partner, you're not gonna be able to fix it. If you wanna pretend like you're not actually as sick as you are, you're not gonna get better. You're probably only gonna get worse,
Yeah.
particularly in my experience, like, that is exactly what happened. Don't recommend it. If you wanna pretend like your child isn't having challenges that you know they are having, you're not
Yeah.
gonna be able to fix them, you're not gonna be able to help them. I was just speaking with someone who, is divorced and co-parenting, and there are people who really think that this child that they have together should be getting some professional help. But one of the parents is in denial and won't do it. And like you think
Yeah.
about the unnecessary suffering that
Yes.
denial causes,
Yeah.
like you have to let it go. You have to get over it. And you just have to be honest about whatever it is you're facing in order to do something about it.
Yeah. Oh, I so appreciate, Marissa, what you just named there, which is the gap between um like the gap between what we tell ourselves about what grief is and then what grief really is, or the pain of what your illness is bringing you versus accepting it. And that pain, while we can't avoid pain, we can avoid suffering. And you
Yes.
talk about that
Yes.
in the book. What have you learned personally in your own, and keep learning, by the way, because I don't
Yeah.
think you don't pretend and I don't pretend that we like
I
figure
don't know
this all out
anything.
magically.
No, no. I'm like, I still don't know anything.
I mean, I'm still a work in progress. What are you learning about that difference, and how do you approach your life to sort of move between those things?
Yeah, for me, and I don't think I ended up using this metaphor in the book, but there is a metaphor in Buddhism of like first arrow and second arrow.
Yes.
Like the first arrow that hits you is pain. It is a broken leg. It is, a broken heart. It is the loss of a loved one. The second arrow is you choosing to ignore the first arrow. And so when we choose to ignore the first arrow, instead of going to the doctors and like getting a cast for that broken leg, we keep walking on it. Instead of going to therapy and bereavement groups and trying to figure out what support you need to move through your loss, you try to ignore it. You stuff it down and bury it, and it manifests in other ways. I was just reading, I'm just going to plug somebody else's
Yeah.
book for a second because it's so good. I'm probably only 25-30% through it, but Tahari Jones' Kin. Have you started it yet?
I haven't started it yet, but it is on my list to read. Okay.
There's some good grief lines in there, like some
Okay.
really good stuff. And one of the things that it's like this wise older Black woman midwife says, she talks about the pain that is created from unshed tears. And so, like, you have to go through the pain and like acknowledge it and be honest about it and figure out what you're going to do about it. Otherwise, you're just going to create more suffering. Like, it's
Yeah.
inevitable.
Yeah. I think we are taught, so many of us in so many in our family systems and the broader culture that we live in, that like, what's the point in crying, or what's the point in yelling about it or being rageful
There's
about it?
plenty of point,
There's
actually.
plenty of point, and actually it is what allows us to move past the block and then figure out, and what now?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's part of what you talk about in the book is like you had to move through this acceptance so that you could start to discover, okay, how am I going to prioritize my energy? You use the four spoons, the spoon
Spoons,
theory,
yeah, spoon theory.
spoon theory metaphor. Can you tell us about the wisdom of the spoon theory metaphor and what it allowed you to?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
spoon theory is very common in like the disability and chronic illness space. And it basically suggests that, you think of your energy as the number of spoons that you have available to you to use throughout the course of a day. Someday it might be two, someday it might be four, another day it might be 10, who knows? But by being honest about how many spoons you have, it enables you to prioritize how you're going to utilize and spend down that energy. And then the other thing that I will say is, because we are so accustomed to being told that, there's no point to being sad or, verbalizing emotions or being angry or any of that, we often do feel stuck. And, like it feels like something is there, but you're not really sure what it is or what to do about it. And one practice that I read about, a couple of years ago, Rick Rubin has
Yeah.
this book. Is it like it's like the art of creativity or the creative life, something like
Yes.
that. And in there, he describes an exercise that he often puts his artists through when they feel stuck. You set a timer for 5 minutes and you punch a pillow as hard as you can. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to make it to 5 minutes. Before then, you are either going to figure out what it is that you're actually angry or upset about, and or you're going to start crying. And sometimes it's enough to just like get it out and to name the thing. And there is healing in that too. And so I want to make sure people understand that. Like when we name our emotions, our feelings, that is what reduces their power over us. And
Yes.
we're taught that like we don't need to do that, but actually you kind of do.
You do. And emotions live in your body. So even when you're
Yeah.
thinking about you're like experiencing a chronic or serious illness, and you touch on this in the book, you can have a really catastrophic effect on your body. And I want to come back to something that you said earlier about just like naming, acknowledging, like, don't have the suffering of the
Yeah.
second arrow so that you can do something about it. I want to be clear, and you talked about this a lot in the book too. This is true even when there isn't a fix. So I think
Yeah.
a lot of time we think, oh, it's only worth doing if there's a fix. There's an absolute treatment. There's an
That's
absolute,
capitalism.
right? That's an absolute cure. W- What do you think helping us get through to being accepting what is allows us to do in terms of then adaptation versus fix? And why is
Yeah. I
that
mean,
different for us to and important?
not
Yeah.
everything can be fixed. Some things just have to be endured. And, I don't know where in our like transition from the toddler stage that my son is in to adulthood, like I don't know where that is lost. But I'm gonna make sure that that is something that he understands because
Yeah.
unfortunately, most life challenges, there is no fix. Like there is some level of emotional endurance that is
Yeah.
required when it comes to coping with them. And just because there isn't a fix, that doesn't mean that it isn't helpful to you physically, mentally, psychologically to name the thing that
Yeah.
is challenging for you. Because while you may, I'm going to just use the marriage example again, while there may be no fix to you and your husband having different or, two husbands having different perspective on some issue, and usually that's the case. Like John Gottman, the marriage expert, says, I think something like 73% of all arguments in the context of marriage, it's the same fucking fight.
Yeah.
And so that may continue to be the case, but knowing that like this is the area where you're probably going to butt heads over and over again until forever, it helps you manage it better. Like it's not a gonna go away type thing, but it really can like equip you to better deal with the thing.
Yeah. I think that idea of building our emotional resilience or building our resilience to be able to be with, we often talk in grief around, I think about my friend Dr. Joanne Ketchtor, bearing the
Yeah.
unbearable, or we learn to build the musculature to carry the weight. And though I think that can feel, and you're welcome if you're hearing this, to feel defeating or can feel overwhelming to hear that, I'm promising you there's something on the other side of that acceptance, because there is some kind of freedom for you to then do. And you talk about this so beautifully in the book, like, what do I value? If my energy is 4 spoons
Yeah.
today, how am I
What
spending
matters?
my 4 spoons? Who am I spending my time with? What am I doing with my time? Can you talk a little bit about, you know, and you experience this, I'm sure, in the wake of your mom's death too, but what were some of the clarifying, I call them another fucking growth opportunities. These are what I call AFGOs. Like, what are some of the clarifying lessons, or, and again, this isn't everything happens for a reason. In case you were listening
No,
and thinking I was
no,
going to say that
no.
to you, that's bull. What do you think this latest season of your grief, of great grief, has helped you come to recognize in terms of?
I think one of the most important things is that even though, I had a sick parent and was raised by a disabled woman, I didn't know anything about what it feels like or what it means to actually have a disability until I got one. So, like, that is like a big one. Like, I see
Yeah.
the world differently now, and I see what's required for inclusion to be real differently now as well. And like, I just think that's really important. We need more
Yeah.
able-bodied people to see the world that way. And like, I'm not fully there yet. I would say I'm still partially disabled. There's a lot
Yeah.
that I can't do at this point. But I know I'm on my way. And when I get back to that other place, like, I'm a different person. So definitely more empathy as well, like, sort of goes along with that. I am more patient. I will never be described as a patient person, but I am more patient because, I've had to learn how to be. Like, I have a
Yeah.
million things I plan to do every single day, and I don't have a million spoons. Like, I didn't have a million spoons before I got sick either, let's
Yeah.
be honest. But I have even fewer now. And so it's like
Yeah.
ruthless prioritization, and just a commitment to the things that I intend to do. I'm going to get to them. It just might not be today. But like, the
Yeah.
things that are meant for me aren't going to miss me. And so just being both gentle and a bit more patient, I think, is really important. Um, and then in addition to like ruthless prioritization, my commitment to hope is even more ruthless, because if you are able to honestly assess your current reality and begin to make a plan for a better future, like, you will get there eventually, but
Yeah.
only if you believe that better future is a real thing. If you don't believe in that, you're not going to get there, because the world is it's just too hard, honestly.
Well, I definitely want to make sure we talk a little bit more about hope before we close our time together today. And you even included the sort of your own working definition, or a preferred definition of hope, and told the story of your granddad, I think, or great granddad. But I don't want to jump over um, what you named there. And I think this is so important for this conversation that we're having, your experience, but also for everyone listening. And that is, and I can't claim this, I heard this from somebody the other day. It wasn't like she said that we're not, for those of us who don't have a chronic illness or some disease, we're not able bodied, we're currently abled,
Yeah,
meaning
I love that.
every single one of us,
At some
whether
point.
temporarily or permanently. And I certainly experienced this navigating breast cancer treatment, have periods of disability, or
Yep.
and we come to recognize the way in which our systems are so ill-equipped to include all of us. But you talked very honestly, and again, one of the many ways I appreciated your authenticity in this book, around your own internalized ableism,
Oh yeah.
and how working through that to some degree, not saying you necessarily got completely to the other side, was part of what was necessary for you to get to a place of acceptance, so that you could get to the place of, okay, so now what are my spoons and what am I spending it on?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of grappling with what you came to recognize as internalized ableism and what you're
Yeah, I
learning
mean,
still?
honestly, I think of it as akin to what a lot of white people, not all, obviously, but many white people have gone through around race and racism over the last handful of years. The only difference being, obviously, you can't become like black for a period of time. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that recognition of the way that it's so
yeah, like
deep in the
it's in
psyche and
everything. It's in
yeah,
everything. And
yeah,
like, you know, here I am thinking I'm doing a good job because I recognize certain things as challenges for people who have different bodies because of my experience with my mom. But it's like until it's your body, you
yeah,
just don't really get it and you don't understand how much thinking and strategizing and planning is required for someone whose body doesn't function properly to be in and to be safe in the world because most spaces are
yeah.
not actually great for
No,
disabled people. You know,
no.
yes, there are like things that are required in a lot of public spaces as a
Yeah,
result of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. But, like, first of all, houses of worship are completely
yeah,
excluded from that. Second of all, the vast majority of spaces do what is minimally required.
yeah,
Like there is no extra, there is no get going out of the way, there is no like real awareness for, as an example, how hard it is to navigate O'Hare Airport as a person with a disability. That was terrible. I wish I hadn't done it and would never do that. Like it was awful. There's nothing, you know, another example, I did like aggressive, intense rest for an entire week so that by the time the weekend hit, I could do one activity, and it was to drive to a farm that's 10 minutes up the road. I live in the Hudson Valley. There's farms like 10, 15, 20 minutes in every direction. And this farm had strawberry picking, you know, like for kids, like
yeah,
great, super fun. And I grew up like picking fruit and come from like a farm family. So I was like, yes, I'm gonna take Bennett. It'll be like an hour activity. Like I literally got extra rest all week long so I could do this. It's gonna be awesome. I get there, something I hadn't factored in. And again, this is ableism. Like, why would I have thought about this? I never had to think about these things before. The distance from where you park to the strawberry patch. And when I learned that that was like a 7-ish minute walk, which before would have been like, oh my God, that's lovely. Like, that's awesome. I was like, oh, we actually can't do this. Like, I can't both like do that walk, know that I'm going to have to do that walk on the way out. And then for 35, 40 minutes in between, be like bending over and, you know, helping the kid collect strawberries, which grow very close to the ground. And so we had to leave. You know, I took him to a park. It was fine. He was none the wiser. Like, he didn't care, but I cared. And so, you know, having those kinds of experiences, like it just changes how you see the world. And
yeah.
once you see the world through a disabled lens, everything just looks different.
We'll be right back with more of this beautiful conversation. Grief is normal and universal, but we all move through it in our own unique ways. In our grief phobic culture, that can leave us feeling lost, overwhelmed, and alone. That's definitely how I felt after my husband died. That's why I wrote my book, Grief is a Sneaky Bitch, an uncensored guide to navigating loss, as a compassionate and practical companion guide. Drawing from years of experience and countless conversations with people who've walked this path, I offer insights and invitations that will help you feel seen, held, and empowered to be in your grief and to move forward with it, not on from it. Whether you're grieving the loss of a loved one, a relationship, a job, or a dream, this book meets you where you're at with honesty, humor, heart, and of course, a judicious use of cussing. It's available now at your local independent bookseller or favorite online bookseller. I personally love bookshop.org. If you'd rather listen because grief brain makes reading feel impossible, and I totally get it, I've got you. I narrated the book myself, and you can find it on Audible. Yeah. Yeah. You talked about in the book, you told the story of when your friend called you and you sort of finally had to admit to
Yeah.
yourself and to her.
And God bless her. Like, this woman is like a rock star celebrity in the disability space. I didn't know that either. Again, ableism. But I knew she was a rock star. We'd worked together in the White House. She's the Disability Justice Program Officer at the Ford Foundation. Her name's Rebecca Coakley. And when
Yeah.
I announced publicly that I had long COVID, on Instagram, she was like, I'm gonna give you a call, like text me, whatever.
Yeah.
And we spent an hour on the phone, which at the time it was really hard for me to even be on the phone for that long, but it was a very necessary conversation. And I cried like a baby. And she was like, yes, you're disabled. And, Rebecca is a little person. Like, I forget I use the technical term in the
Yeah.
book. I can't remember what it is
Yes.
off the top of
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
But, to have this woman who also
Has this
had a
lived
disabled
experience.
mom, has the lived experience, and is a leader in this space say that to me, because I was also still feeling like, well, I'm not blind, I'm not deaf, I'm not
Right.
in a wheelchair. You know what I mean? Like,
That whole
which is also
qualifying
ableism.
thing.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
And so to have her be like, sweetheart, it was like, oh, okay, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. You're here. You're part of the community. I so appreciate that, Marissa, and also just want to sort of pull out something that you named there, which I think is also both a loss that we often experience but don't recognize, but just and is so important, both as somebody who maybe is navigating some kind of chronic or serious illness or has a loved one who has, which is um, taking for granted the amount of mental and emotional energy it takes to plan
Yeah,
any simple activity, and
yep,
that is its own expenditure, and that when you come to recognize that that's not something that you can do easily anymore, that that's its own
yeah.
loss too. And I think that's just important, is so important to name. And you talked in the book about sort of coming to grips with the fact that, okay, this is my body, this is my lived experience. Now I'm learning new strategies, which you outline some great ideas and tips, things you practice for yourself around how you spend your energy and you're adapting. You touched on towards the end of the book the importance of recognizing healing as a thing that we are doing
Yeah.
versus I said this once in an interview with somebody. It's like the ing, not the ed, and so many of us think we're going to get to this like I've grieved, I've healed. And if you're in recovery, if you're in any other kind of space, if you've done the work, you know that it's ing. What are you learning even now as you're today, as we're recording, feeling better than maybe you did a year ago? Why is it important for us to recognize healing as a
Well, it's
active?
so funny because, like, we're comfortable with the idea that, the guy who played football in high school and then got the knee injury, that knee still acts up every time it rains. Like that makes sense to us. But for some reason, the idea that, my mom's been dead for 18 years and like, it like I'm fine with it most days because she's been dead for 18 years.
Yeah.
But there are still things that come up where it's like, oh, I really wish my mom was around for that one. Or like, even if it's on the positive end of the spectrum, like, oh my God, my father brought my child home sometime in the last couple of weeks. They had an arcade date. Kid had the best time. We're all just in the kitchen chatting. And my son all of a sudden goes, did you guys know Pepsi keeps you up at night? And I was like, it was like, like record stopped. And my husband and I look at each other and we're like, did you give him Pepsi? And he was like, only like this much. I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, and that was one of those moments where I was like, I would love to be able to text this woman and be like, what is wrong with him? Like,
Yeah.
why would he do that? Like, who gives Pepsi to a 4-year-old? Like, our kid has had soda like twice. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's an ongoing thing. And I think if people can view it as that and that like that's the way it's supposed to be and that that's normal, it just makes it easier because then you're not piling on guilt or judgment or shame or anything else when you have feelings one day. Like you can just like have the feelings and then move on.
Yeah. Or your illness is takes a toll and it's feels like it's back you're back to a level 7 instead of down to a level 2. I think it's back to what we talked about earlier in the conversation, which is that suffering that happens in the gap between the
Yeah.
stories we tell ourselves about what it quote unquote should be and what our lived experience is. And the more that we can keep coming back to honoring this is just the truth of how it is, then we're spending so much less time and energy in the shame of it all, the judgment of it all, the resistance of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we're getting close to the end of our conversation today, and I want to honor your time, speaking of resting, and we agreed to a 50-minute conversation. But I wanted to come back around to something that you alluded to earlier, which is the power of, in your life, in your estimation, hope. And tell us a little bit about how you frame hope, because of course there's lots of different definitions. And especially as we're thinking about in these times, culturally, globally, but even in our own lived personal challenges or grief experiences that we're having. If you, I don't know if you want to tell about your granddad's story, but just even your story or your approach to what do we need to know about hope?
Yeah, I mean, hope is the only thing that actually produces change, but it's not a, I am facing significant economic insecurity, so I'm going to play the lotto every day and see what
Yeah.
happens. Or,
Yeah.
alternatively, like I think I'm really good at insert X thing that you've never actually tried to do, but maybe somebody else is famous for, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go do that. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
be the next Oprah. No, you're not, sweetheart. Like that era is dead, first of all. Like media isn't
Yeah.
even structured the same way anymore. And so, again, I am all about like real talk and reality. So, this version of hope is about seeing where you are today, like clearly without any sort of rose colored glasses,
Yeah.
and then being honest about where you want to go and taking the steps to get there.
Yeah.
Your hope is what will lead you to that future reality and provide the energy to keep moving forward, even when things are shitty and dark and heavy and just painful. And so figuring out how to build that kind of hope within yourself is critical. Like it is a critical part of healing. It's a critical part of any sort of change, whether you're talking about change in your life or massive social change. Like hope is the civil rights movement. It's what got us gay marriage. Like that's what hope is, but it's hope plus action that gets you to where you need to be.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you named action there because I think that's really, and which, by the way, also can be sometimes inaction. I just want to come back around to the rest. Like
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
your
yeah.
hope is like, I'm going to nap today or I'm going to
Yeah.
rest today because
That's
that's
one of
the
my number one
action
actions because
that
that's the
I
thing
need
that
to
is most
move.
helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just such an important reminder. I think you name hope as like having a feeling of trust. And it's again about this idea of trusting in a different way of being, a different future, a different outcome, not
Yes.
in a passive way,
Yep.
um, but also not in a way that I can wrestle myself into it or like corrective or be coercive about it.
No.
It's sort of a loose grip approach. I have this feeling of trust that there's going to be a different outcome, and I'm going to take the baby steps that are in front of me, the actions or the inactions that are moving me in that general direction. And that when you
Exactly.
feel overwhelmed and lost in the uncertainty of things, you keep coming back to what can I do in this moment? What can I pay attention to in this
Yeah.
moment? And that's the action, right? Of hope.
And also being open to pivoting. I have a friend, Emily Tish Sussman. She has a podcast called She Pivots. And, being open to the fact that, you know, where exactly you think you should go, like it should be a flexible
Yes.
destination. Like
Yeah.
I know I am getting better. How long that's going to take, exactly what it's going to require, what it's going to look like I don't know. And so I have tried and I'm in the middle of trying lots of different things in order to get there, but I'm not committed to like, oh, I will be 100% healthy when this book comes out on April 7th. Like At this
Yeah.
point, that's probably not true. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, oh well. You know, so like
Yeah.
being flexible and open and willing to pivot and try different things. You know, it's not just one strategy that got
Yeah.
us the Civil Rights Act or, you know, like I said, gay
Yes.
marriage. It's a bunch of strategies and different things that were tested and implemented and, you know, reviewed and researched over time that got us these things. And so I think it's also important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful reminder, because we don't know what that outcome is. So we could just have to keep coming back to, but what is the quality of the experience that we are moving towards? And that the shell or the framework of what it looks like may not be what we envision on day one or day 365 or year
Exactly.
five. And that having that flexibility to move towards it is, and the trust, that feeling of trust, yeah, is essential. Oh, my friend, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your warmth, for your authenticity, as I said, and for offering us this gorgeous book. It's called Waiting for Dawn Living with Uncertainty. I'm going to drop a link in the show notes for today's episode. My friend, what an absolute delight to be with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. All right. We'll see you next time, everyone, on Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. Bye. What did I tell you? Marissa's unrelenting honesty, her warmth, and her wisdom, combined with her commitment to hope, feels like the necessary medicine we need in these times. Her new book, Waiting for Dawn Living with Uncertainty, is out April 7th, and I'll link it in the show notes for today's episode. Now, hosting this show means the world to me, and I hope it means something to you too. If you've learned something new, felt seen or acknowledged in your own grief, or maybe just feel more equipped to show up for someone grieving the death of their loved one, I'd like to ask you a favor. I'd so appreciate it if you took just a few minutes to head to the Grief is a Sneaky Bitch show page on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating, and then write a review telling me about what the show meant to you. Okay, my friends, until next time, I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding you in my heart.